Kia ora, guys, gals, and legionnaires. Rycon here, coming at you with a little bit of a different video. You see, we just recently hit a milestone, and it's a milestone that you might not have realized. We have just had over 2,000 videos published here on the channel. Now, the channel has been around for over 5 years, which is a decent duration. It would seem over 2,000 videos published, which is still a number that doesn't quite make a huge amount of sense to me, but it is what it is. The facts don't lie. And I know that many of you here on the channel now are new to the channel and might not have seen some of those videos that occurred that were published in the past. And so today, to celebrate having over 2,000 videos on Rycon Roleplays, I thought I would go back through our history, back through the archive, to share with you some series that you might not have realized were even on the channel to begin with. Now, the first in question, and probably the series that I am most proud of, surprisingly enough, is Outlast. There are 3 different Outlast series that I have told on the channel. The first being Outlast 1, which is the tale of Miles Upshaw. The second being Whistleblower, following Wayland Park. And the third being Outlast 2, following Blake Langerman. Now, the reason that these series are some of my favorite that I've produced so far is because they are horror games. And as you can see from the background, it was a series that I was able to actually inject a little bit of live action into. Something that I'm hoping to be able to do with more series in the future. Outlast is a journey into madness, and taking a character from being completely sane, rational, and understanding to that madness is an interesting journey to go down. The fact that these games are legitimately terrifying also helps a lot with the performance. I don't have to act or pretend to be afraid in these games because I'm genuinely terrified. And some of you will know that I have come close to passing out multiple times while recording this series due to the hyperventilating nature of running down corridors completely out of breath. I do find myself getting very lightheaded and even falling over on the keyboard while being either Blake, Wayland, or Miles. So that is the first series that I have to present to you today, and well, it's a 3-for-1 really. Each series is a different journey into that madness, and if you haven't had a chance to watch them yet, I highly recommend that you do. With the nature of YouTube being how it is now, the majority of those videos are demonetized, but they are still very important episodes to me, and I still love to be able to share their story with you all. Now, secondly, or fourthly, however you want to count it, we find ourselves with Let's Roleplay Project Zomboid, a story following a writer, or a would-be writer, named Nicholas Miller, a man very ill-equipped and ill-suited to survive the apocalypse, but nevertheless he gives it his best shot. With his trusty fry pan in hand and animal companion Walter, the rubber duck, Nick takes every step he can to attempt to survive in the world of Project Zomboid. This was my first and only Project Zomboid series on the channel, and I won't spoil how it ends, but it is quite the journey again for another character, starting off very weak and unprepared and having to deal with the isolation and loneliness that sets in when you are trying to survive all by yourself, and well, with the rest of the world trying to eat you. I've always wanted to return to Project Zomboid, and with the original series I was holding off until NPCs had been added into the game. That was in 2014. It's now 2019, hasn't exactly happened yet, so I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Recently there's been an overhaul to the game, completely changing how it plays, how it looks, how it feels, and I'm beginning to think that it might be time for us to dive back on into that series. But that's talk for another time, and if you do want to see a story told of Project Zomboid, the story, the tale of Nicholas Miller might be just for you. Now, the next one on our list, while every single construction truck in the world decides to try and back into the next door neighbor's house, is a little series called Seeking Sovngarde. Now, Frost wasn't my first foray into a permadeath series. That all started with Seeking Sovngarde, taking the special edition of Skyrim, filling it full of mods to make things incredibly difficult for us, and then adding in the flavor of it being permadeath. We covered a number of characters' stories in it, and unintentionally the series actually played out in a chronological order, with each new character existing within that same universe and carrying on from where the last had left off. It led to some pretty interesting scenarios, encounters, and a lot of the seedier pants action that I know many of you enjoy in Frost. Seeking Sovngarde is another one of those series that I know many of you have asked to come back to the channel, and I do think there is a way that Seeking Sovngarde can come back and we can tell some new stories in Skyrim with it at the same time. I don't have a concrete position in our schedule for where that would come back into, and because Leon's Tale is taking that while longer to get back to you all, Seeking Sovngarde might be the perfect remedy to fill in that slot. So again, if you enjoy the permadeath nature of Frost, I know that you're going to love Seeking Sovngarde. And the final series that I have to share with you all today is Star Wars A RimWorld Tale. Some of you might be unaware, but I have covered RimWorld extensively on the channel in the past, and the most recent series of that was Star Wars A RimWorld Tale, taking a plethora of Star Wars mods and effectively converting RimWorld into a Star Wars game. We had Jedi, Sith, bounty hunters, and everything in between, and it's the longest RimWorld series I believe that we have on the channel, clocking in at around about 96 episodes. So I guess that's how that helps contribute to the 2000. Our series starts off with two Jedi coming from very different schools of thought. One, myself, and the other, my good friend Triton. There is a lot of madness in this series, but it was one that I really enjoyed recording, and RimWorld, again, is another one of those series that is going to be returning to the channel soon. So if you'd like to get a feel for what a Rikon RimWorld experience is like, give Star Wars A RimWorld Tale a try. So that wraps us up for today's episode, celebrating the 2,000 videos that are now on the channel for you all to enjoy. I wouldn't recommend trying to watch every video in chronological order. That would get very confusing, and that's probably a year's worth of content. So unless you have a huge amount of time to kill, perhaps just cherry pick one of those series that I've mentioned today. The final little add-on addition that I will drop in there is my live play recording of Zealand. For those of you who don't know, Zealand is a tabletop role-playing game that I developed with Stormforge Productions. It's my very own game, it's a fleshed out world, and I have had the pleasure of telling a story within that world with my good friends for the last few years. If you do like tabletop role-playing games or role-playing in general, I highly recommend that you do check out Zealand. The first season is a little shaky in terms of the recording and our general gameplay. We were developing the game at the time. I like to think that we got things down to a finer science in the later seasons, but the whole story is enjoyable, terrifying, and a lot of fun. The fourth season, in fact, is going to be returning to your screens over the holiday period. So be sure to keep your eyes out for that, and more goodness coming to the channel very, very soon. Thank you for joining me for this celebration, and thank you for those of you who have been here for all 2,000 plus of these videos getting published. Here's to the next 2,000. Thank you all for joining me. I have been Rikon. You have all been awesome. And until next time, stay tuned.